Rarely mentioned in polite horror conversations is this chilling detail. During production, almost everyone connected to The Exorcist experienced a death in their close circle. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly. Cast members, crew members, even relatives, coincidence perhaps. Yet the pattern was so persistent that priests were called to bless the set more than once. Whether you believe in curses or not, what happened behind the scenes of this 1973 classic remains one of Hollywood's most disturbing production histories. The fire that should not have happened. The most infamous event occurred when a sudden fire tore through the McNeil house set. The blaze destroyed nearly everything. Walls collapsed, ceilings blackened. Production halted for 6 weeks. Investigators never found a clear cause. What made it truly unsettling was this. Reagan's bedroom, the very room used for the exorcism scenes, remained untouched, perfectly intact. Director William Friedkin later admitted the incident deeply rattled the cast. Some crew members quit immediately. Others refused to enter the rebuilt set without a blessing. The studio downplayed the event publicly, but privately, fear spread. The room at the center of demonic possession, surviving a destructive fire, felt like a warning to many involved. 9 deaths linked to the production. By the time filming wrapped, at least 9 people associated with the production had died, not actors in minor accidents years later. These deaths occurred during or shortly after filming. Among them were actors' relatives, crew members, and technicians. The most disturbing was the death of actor Jack McGowan, who played Burke Dennings. His character dies in the film. Weeks after completing his scenes, McGowan died suddenly from pneumonia. Cast members whispered that the film blurred lines between fiction and reality, whether coincidence or pattern recognition. The growing list of deaths intensified belief that something unseen hovered over the project. A real priest was emotionally shaken. The film cast real-life priest Thomas Birmingham in a small role. During production, he reportedly performed blessings on set. What is less discussed is how shaken he became after watching certain scenes unfold. Birmingham later described an overwhelming atmosphere on set. Not just tension, something heavier. He insisted on spiritual protection for cast and crew. Friedkin encouraged authenticity in every frame. That meant long hours, harsh conditions, and emotional breakdowns. Even clergy members were not immune to the psychological strain. For many observers, when a priest looks unsettled, people begin to ask serious questions. The cold. That was not just acting to capture visible breath during exorcism scenes. The bedroom set was refrigerated to near freezing temperatures. The cast endured weeks in brutal cold. Pipes froze. Crew members wore heavy coats. Yet young Linda Blair wore only a thin nightgown. She later described genuine fear during filming. Mechanical rigs violently shook her bed. Sudden explosions of sound were triggered without warning. Injuries occurred. The tension was not cinematic illusion, it was engineered discomfort. Actors have spoken about lingering psychological effects long after production ended. Some wonder whether prolonged exposure to physical stress amplified the eerie atmosphere that still radiates from those scenes. Ellen Burstyn's real scream, one of the most painful moments in the film, occurs when Reagan throws her mother backward. The harness rig used for the stunt malfunctioned. Ellen Burstyn was yanked violently to the floor. The scream heard in the final cut is real. So is the injury. Burstyn suffered a permanent spinal injury that haunted her for years. Friedkin kept the take. The authenticity heightened the film's intensity, but deepened the sense that suffering on set was not accidental. The line between performance and harm blurred. For many involved, the production no longer felt like filmmaking, but it felt like endurance. The voice that came from somewhere darker. Regan's demonic voice was not performed by Linda Blair. Instead, it was created by actress Mercedes McCambridge. To produce the rasping, inhuman sound, she consumed raw eggs and chain-smoked cigarettes. She even had herself strapped to a chair to create physical strain in her voice. What few people realize is that McCambridge insisted on receiving a Catholic priest's blessing before recording. She later claimed the sessions felt psychologically disturbing. The guttural screams echoed through the studio late at night. Technicians described the atmosphere as oppressive. The voice did not simply sound evil. It felt invasive. When audiences later fainted in theaters, some cast members said they were not surprised. They had already lived inside that sound. Jason Miller's breakdown. Jason Miller, who played Father Karras, was not a seasoned film actor. He was primarily a playwright. Friedkin cast him for authenticity and then relentlessly pushed him. Before emotional scenes, the director slapped him unexpectedly to provoke genuine reactions. During filming, Miller reportedly became withdrawn and anxious. The themes of doubt and faith mirrored his own spiritual struggles. Friends later described how deeply the role affected him. After the film's release, he found it difficult to escape the character's torment. Some believe the psychological intensity of the role blurred into his real life. The exorcism scenes required hours of confrontation with screaming and blasphemous dialogue. Miller admitted he sometimes felt spiritually exhausted. The priest who died before the premiere. William O'Malley portrayed Father Dyer in the film. He was a real Jesuit priest and longtime friend of director William Friedkin. What unsettled many was that O'Malley had been hesitant about participating in a horror film centered on demonic possession. He later revealed that during one intense scene, Friedkin unexpectedly slapped him hard across the face to provoke tears. The take used in the final cut captures genuine shock. O'Malley endured the production, but admitted he found it emotionally draining. Not long after filming, individuals connected to his circle began passing away, reinforcing whispers of a curse. Though O'Malley lived many years afterward, the early rumors clung to him in the film like shadow. Fury. The set was blessed repeatedly. As production continued, rumors intensified. Cast and crew began requesting spiritual protection. Real priests were invited to bless the set multiple times. Holy water was sprinkled across sound stages. Prayers were offered before difficult scenes. Director William Friedkin did not publicly promote these actions, yet he did not stop them either. The fear was palpable. Some crew members refused to work overtime in the exorcism room. Others carried religious items in their pockets. Hollywood productions are known for superstition, but this went further. The repeated need for blessings indicated that even skeptics were unsettled by the atmosphere. The story of the curse was no longer just rumor, it was behavior. Audience reactions that terrified theaters. When the film premiered in 1973, reports flooded in from cinemas across the country. Viewers fainted. Some vomited. Others ran screaming from theaters. Ambulances were called. Newspapers published headlines warning sensitive audiences. The realism achieved by Friedkin pushed horror into unfamiliar territory. People were not reacting to fantasy creatures. They were reacting to something presented as spiritually possible. The Catholic Church issued statements clarifying doctrine. Lines wrapped around blocks. For believers, the film felt like documentation. For skeptics, the intensity seemed almost manipulative. Either way, the hysteria amplified the myth of the curse. If the production suffered tragedy, the audience now seemed physically affected too. The director who played psychological games. William Friedkin believed fear should be real, not simulated. To achieve it, he fired guns on set without warning. He slapped actors seconds before emotional scenes. He isolated cast members to heighten anxiety. Crew later admitted morale was strained. Friedkin denied cruelty, but admitted he wanted authentic terror. The unpredictability created tension that bled into performances. Some actors felt manipulated, others felt emotionally wrung out. The atmosphere was not collaborative, it was confrontational. Over time, the strain compounded existing fears about the so-called curse. When exhaustion meets superstition, imagination can grow dark. And on this set, imagination was already primed by themes of possession and faith. Linda Blair's physical ordeal. Linda Blair was only 14 when filming began. The mechanical rig that thrashed her on the bed malfunctioned during one take. She was violently shaken and suffered a back injury. Blair later described genuine fear during many sequences. She was surrounded by adults discussing demons and possession for months. The intense makeup required hours in the chair. The isolation of her character became her reality. When rumors of deaths circulated, she heard them too. For a teenager, that environment could feel overwhelming. Years later, Blair reflected on how surreal it all felt. The film made her famous overnight, but it also marked her childhood with an experience unlike any other. The author who believed it was real. William Peter Blatty wrote the novel on which the film was based. He insisted the story was inspired by a documented case of exorcism from 1949. Blatty firmly believed demonic possession was possible. He approached the screenplay not as fantasy but as theological drama. His conviction influenced the tone of the production. Cast and crew knew the creator viewed the material as spiritually grounded. That seriousness deepened the atmosphere on set. Blatty later claimed odd incidents occurred during filming, though he avoided sensational details. When a writer treats horror as reality, it changes how others perceive the story. Fiction becomes something heavier. The scene that was cut for being too disturbing. One sequence known as the spider walk showed Reagan descending the staircase upside down in a jerking, unnatural motion. Early test audiences reacted with shock. Some were overwhelmed. The scene was removed from the original release because it was deemed too much. It resurfaced decades later in extended versions. Special effects artists had to reverse footage and experiment with wires to achieve the motion. Even crew members admitted the image unsettled them. During production, some believed the visual crossed into territory that felt spiritually provocative. Whether artistic ambition or reckless daring, the scene strengthened the legend that this film pushed boundaries few others would approach. The exorcism chants that echoed for weeks. During filming of the climactic exorcism, Latin chants filled the refrigerated bedroom set for days. The repetition of ritual dialogue created a hypnotic rhythm. Cast members later said it lingered in their heads long after shooting wrapped. Sound technicians reported an eerie quiet after takes ended. No one laughed. No one relaxed easily. The content of the dialogue was intense and confrontational. The clash between sacred language and violent imagery blurred emotional lines. Even hardened crew veterans admitted the extended exposure felt draining. When you repeat ritual words under freezing lights, while special effects shake the walls, atmosphere becomes something tangible. By the end of production, many were relieved simply to step outside into ordinary daylight. The medical scenes that felt too real. Before the supernatural terror begins, the film shows Reagan undergoing invasive medical tests. Needles, machines, cold hospital lights. These scenes were filmed with clinical precision and used real procedures for accuracy. Audiences often say those moments are harder to watch than the exorcism itself. Doctors were consulted to ensure realism. The arterial blood test shown on screen was not exaggerated for drama. It was accurate. That grounded approach made everything that followed feel disturbingly plausible. Crew members later admitted the sterile hospital environment felt just as oppressive as the exorcism set. The horror did not begin with demons. It began with helplessness. That realism anchored the fear in everyday life. The real church. Backlash upon release. Religious groups reacted strongly. Some churches condemned the film as dangerous. Others surprisingly supported it, claiming it reaffirmed faith. Priests stood outside theaters offering counseling to shaken viewers. The Catholic Church clarified its stance carefully. While possession was acknowledged in doctrine, dramatization on this scale was unprecedented. Media coverage intensified the myth of a curse. When faith institutions publicly debate a horror film, the cultural temperature rises. Viewers entered theaters already primed with fear. The controversy fed the narrative that something spiritually significant surrounded the production. Whether marketing or genuine concern, the backlash amplified the film's dark aura. The stuntman who was nearly killed. During complex stunt sequences involving shaking furniture and collapsing props, several crew members were injured. One technician narrowly avoided serious harm when equipment malfunctioned during a violent effect. The physical demands of the production were extreme for 1973 standards. Mechanical rigs were experimental, safety regulations were not as advanced as today. The intensity of the shoot created an atmosphere where accidents felt inevitable. Each mishap strengthened whispers about the curse. Rational explanations existed: faulty wiring, mechanical stress, human error. Yet repetition fuels superstition. On this film, repetition was constant. The premiere that needed ambulances? At early screenings, theaters stationed medical personnel nearby. Reports documented fainting and panic attacks. Some viewers claimed they could not finish the film. The marketing leaned into these reactions. Posters warned audiences. Headlines described hysteria. For many, this was the first horror film that felt spiritually invasive rather than fictional. The intensity made people question what they were watching. Was it entertainment or confrontation? The collective response turned the film into a cultural event. The so-called curse now extended beyond the set and into public imagination. The fire that burned everything but Reagan's room. We return to the most chilling incident. The unexplained fire that destroyed the McNeil house set halted production for weeks. Investigators cited possible electrical faults, yet one detail remains undeniable. Reagan's bedroom was untouched, not scorched, not damaged, completely intact. Tour cast and crew stood in silence when they saw it. The room built for demonic possession survived flames that consumed everything around it. For believers, this was proof. For skeptics, coincidence. Either way, the image became legend. The curse story solidified in that moment. A horror film about evil survived its own real-world blaze. The Priest Who Died, shortly after release, the film was inspired by a real 1949 exorcism case. The priest who allegedly performed that exorcism died quietly years later, but interest in his story surged after the movie's release. Some claimed strange events surrounded his life. Most historians dismiss these claims as myth-building, yet the merging of documented religious ritual with blockbuster cinema created a rare cultural phenomenon. The line between documented case and Hollywood spectacle blurred permanently. Curse or coincidence, faith or fear. The Exorcist remains one of the most disturbing productions in film history. Fires, injuries, deaths, hysteria. Whether supernatural or psychological, something about this movie unsettled everyone it touched, and maybe that is the real power of horror, not what you see on screen, but what lingers long after the lights come back on.